I am Maeve, and this is my voice. We lived in a small blue house on Maple Street in Detroit, USA. The porch leaned a little, and the mailbox stuck when it rained. My room was at the top of the stairs with a narrow window that faced an old oak tree. In the summer, the leaves drew soft, green shapes on my wall. In winter, I taped the frame to keep the wind out. I worked 3 jobs to keep that house going: cashier at the corner store in the mornings, barista on the night shift, and weekends at a diner. Most months, I slid $900 toward the bills, $430 for the share of the mortgage, $190 for power, $60 for water, and the rest for food and gas. I told myself it was love, and that love was worth the cost. One Friday, I came home late, smelling like coffee and dish soap, and found my life in boxes by the door. My books were taped shut. My sweaters were folded into a plastic bin that I did not own. In the hallway, I heard voices in my old room. My sister Lena had set her suitcase on my bed like a flag on a hill. Her husband, Mark, was clicking my lamp on and off to see if the bulb still worked. My mother, Ruth, stood with her arms crossed, her mouth set hard. My father, Daniel, sat on the edge of the couch and watched the news with the volume low. I stood there a moment, the key still in my hand, and felt how small a person can be in her own house. Lena looked straight at me and said, "Go live in the basement anyway. You'll always be alone." Her voice was smooth and cold, like a coin pressed into a palm. The words landed in my chest and stayed there. I did not shout. I did not throw the box or plead or list the hours I had worked. I was too tired to argue with 4 people, and the whole week. I went down the stairs to the basement and sat on the cold step and did the one thing that calms me. I counted what I had because numbers are plain and do not lie, even when people do. Counting is a small light you can hold in your hand when the room goes dark. In an envelope from paydays and tips I had not yet deposited, I had $1,240. In a jar of coins and ones, I had $83 after I smoothed the crumpled bills and stacked the quarters. Tucked in the binder of old schedules, I had a worn 10-pound note. A traveler from Europe had tipped it to me by mistake months ago, and then laughed and told me to keep it for luck. I kept it because it felt like proof that the world was wider than Maple Street, that a door to far places could fit in my pocket. I lined the money on the step like a tiny wall that was mine. Then I did the second thing that calms me. I told myself the truth. The truth was that I had been paying to heat this house, to keep the lights on, to stock the fridge, and now I was being told to sleep under the pipes. I looked around the basement. It smelled like dust and laundry soap and the wet place where the wall meets the floor each spring. A small window near the ceiling showed a slice of the streetlight and the shadow of the oak tree. The old treadmill leaned against the far wall, a coat rack for clothes no one wore. Boxes of holiday lights sat open, a tangle of color that never made it upstairs last December. I thought about how many mornings I had stood at the stove making eggs before work, how many nights I had counted the register twice to catch a missing dollar, how many Sundays I had folded towels while my sister scrolled her phone. I had learned to be quiet to keep the peace. But quiet is not peace when it means you vanish. I opened the boxes at my feet and packed on my own terms. I chose my work shoes, my heavy sweater, and my toothbrush. I took a photo of my friend Grace by the river in Cleveland, where we had gone one bright Sunday to breathe and remember that life is larger than one room. I wrapped the photo in a t-shirt and slid it between 2 paperbacks. I took my notebooks because I have always written my thoughts to hear them better. I left the broken hair dryer, the torn scarf, the shoes that hurt. I kept the things that were a map: warm clothes, good shoes, a picture of a friend, a pen, and enough cash to buy a door that locks. At 2 a.m., while the house slept, I went up to the kitchen and sat at the table where I had done homework as a girl and sorted tips as a woman. I wrote a note in clear, calm words, the way I speak when I want no confusion. I've been paying to keep this house. I need a home, too. I am leaving. I am safe. I placed the note by the fruit bowl and set my house key on top of it. The clock ticked. The fridge hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard answered my wait like a soft warning. I stood for one more breath and felt my hands grow steady. Steady is better than brave. Steady gets you to the door. I put on my coat and picked up my bag. I opened the front door slowly so the hinge would not creak. The porch boards felt soft under my shoes, and I thought about how long we had meant to fix them and never did. The night air in America was clear and cold and honest. It touched my face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt awake in a way that did not hurt. I walked down the steps and across the small patch of grass. I did not look back at the blue house, because I knew if I saw it, I would remember every good thing and somehow make that bigger than what was happening now. I sat in my old sedan and did not start the engine yet. I counted my cash again. I made a short plan in plain words. Drive east toward the lake, where the roads are known to me. Find a cheap room for a few nights. Guard the envelope with the $1,240, like it is a living thing. Use $100 if I must for food and gas. Keep the 10-pound note for luck and for the reminder that the world is wide and I am allowed to cross it. Send no messages until I have a door that locks from the inside and a key that belongs only to me. Before I turned the key, I pictured the morning I was leaving behind. I saw Ruth in her robe, reaching for the coffee and finding the note instead. I saw Daniel going to the basement to wake me and coming back up slowly, the way a person climbs when the truth is heavy. I saw Lena and Mark standing in the doorway of my old room with their arms full of plans and no idea what to do with the space my leaving would make. I do not wish pain on them, but I knew the shock would come. I had carried shocks for years. It was their turn to feel one and decide what to do with it. I started the car and watched the dashboard glow like a small city. I set my hands at 10 and 2 and looked once at the oak tree that had shaded my window since I was a girl. Then I drove away. The street was empty. The stop signs were red as always. I was one woman with a backpack and a plan and some cash in dollars and pounds, and yet a quiet, strong thing rose in me, the kind that comes when you choose yourself. I drove toward a morning I had not yet seen and toward a place where my name would be on the lease and where no one would ever tell me to live in a basement again. I drove east until the sky turned pink over the highway and the radio found a clear song that I could hum without thinking. My old sedan rattled at 60, but it held steady like a friend who does not talk much. In Toledo, I bought gas and a coffee for $6, and I watched the sun slide up the side of the station like a clean promise. I could have turned back toward Detroit and the blue house, but my hand stayed firm at 10 and 2. I told myself out loud, in a low voice that wouldn't shake, keep going. Find your own door in America. By mid-morning, I reached Cleveland. The city rose in brick and glass, and the lake flashed like a wide sheet of light at the edge of the streets. I rolled slowly through a quiet block where the houses were narrow and kind. A sign in a front yard said rooms for rent, black paint on white wood. I parked. My legs were stiff from the drive, but my mind was clear. I rang the bell and waited. A woman with warm eyes and a sharp voice opened the door. I'm Mrs. Parker, she said. Cash rules. Deposit is $450. Rent is $700. Week to week at first. I did the math in a blink and nodded. My envelope of dollars felt heavier than it was because it meant I could say yes. Mrs. Parker showed me a small attic room with a slanted ceiling, a tiny window, and a door that locked with a simple click. The bed creaked, the carpet was thin, and I loved it at once because it was mine. I carried my backpack up the stairs, and for the first time in a long time, I put a key into a lock that belonged to me alone. I set my money on the desk, counted it twice, and set aside the $450 deposit and the first $175 toward rent for the week. I unpacked my few things: 2 sweaters, work shoes, the picture of me and Grace by the river, and my old notebook. I placed my 10-pound note on the crooked shelf and smiled at it. It felt like a small flag that said I could still cross oceans someday, or at least streets, and that my life was not stuck to one porch. I opened the window and let the cool lake air press softly against my face. The city sounded like dishes and buses and feet on sidewalks. It sounded like a place that might make room for me. That first day, I kept my steps simple. I walked to a small market and bought bread, eggs, apples, and a jar of peanut butter for $35. I made toast and sat on the edge of the bed to eat it, slow and steady. I lined my dollars on the blanket and wrote down every number in my notebook. Gas $41, coffee $2, room deposit $450, groceries $35. I promised myself I would not let fear spend my money for me. In the afternoon, I sent one message to Grace. I am safe in Cleveland. I have a door that locks. She wrote back, I knew you would save yourself, and nothing more. It was the perfect size of care. The next morning, I put on my neatest clothes and walked into the center of the city with a stack of printed resumes. The cafe on the corner smelled like fresh beans and hope. The manager, a woman named Julie with quick hands, asked if I could start the next day. It's $15 an hour plus tips, she said. I said yes and felt the floor steady under my shoes. 2 blocks later, I stepped into a quiet bookstore with a bell over the door and a cat asleep by the magazines. The owner, a man named Mr. Lee, looked at my resume and nodded. Evenings, $14 an hour, he said. We close at 9. Can you alphabetize? I smiled. Faster than you expect. He laughed and shook my hand. I walked back to Mrs. Parker's house with the lake wind in my hair and a sheet of paper in my pocket with 2 start dates. I ran my thumb over the paper as if it were a smooth stone. By Tuesday, I had a rhythm. Mornings at the cafe, I learned the hiss of the steamer and the way some people like their coffee to taste like a memory. There was a coworker named Noah who moved fast and stayed kind. He showed me how to close the register and said, "You're fast." I liked that word. Fast means not stuck. Evenings at the bookstore, the world hushed. I shelved travel guides to America and Europe, dusted the edges of paperbacks, and learned to find a title by the feel of its spine. The cat liked to sleep on the M shelf, and I slid books gently around him. When I walked home, my feet ached, but my heart felt light in a way I trusted. I kept track of every dollar and pound. I bought a used coat for $28 from a thrift shop that played old songs. I found a secondhand lamp for $12. When I turned it on, the attic room felt like a small stage where I could speak at last. I bought a bus pass for $22 so I wouldn't burn through gas. At night, I folded my tips into a jar and told myself the numbers out loud. This is $63 for the week so far. I wrote a rule for myself in clear words on an index card. No one throws me out again. I pay myself first $100 a week to savings, even if it means rice and eggs for dinner. I choose who enters my house, even if my house is one room with a slanted ceiling. I taped the card to the wall beside the window, so the lake light could pass over it each morning. Mrs. Parker had strong steps and soft eyes. She kept her house neat and her rules simple. Quiet after 10, she said. Rent in cash on Fridays. No trouble. I gave her the first week's $700 on time, and she nodded once, like a judge who had decided to trust me. A man named Mr. James lived on the second floor. He fixed the loose porch board one afternoon and waved at me with the hammer still in his hand. On Saturday morning, a woman named Carla from 3 houses down sold coffee from a folding table for $1. I bought one and told her my name. She said, "Welcome to the block," as if I had always belonged here and had just been late. When my first paychecks came, I sat on the floor and counted in clean lines. Cafe, 25 hours at $15 is $375 plus $68 in tips. Bookstore, 18 hours at $14 is $252. Before I did anything else, I slid $100 into an envelope and wrote savings on the front in big letters. Then I put $200 aside for the next rent. Then $40 for groceries, $20 for gas, $10 for laundry. Each dollar had a job, and each job was part of building a house inside my life where no one but me held the key. I kept the 10-pound note in my wallet, not for spending, but for courage. When I touched it, I thought about the word Europe and how it meant the world is wide, not that I had to leave America to be free. At night, I opened the small window and listened to the city rest. I could hear a train somewhere and a dog down the block. I wrote in my notebook until the words turned calm. I told a page about Noah's quiet joke, Julie's quick hands, Mr. Lee's careful way with dusty covers, Mrs. Parker's strong steps, Mr. James's hammer, and Carla's table. I wrote the names because names make a place real. Then I wrote the number of days since I had left the Blue House, not as a measure of distance from my family, but as a measure of how long I had been choosing myself. I pressed my palm to the index card rules, turned off the $12 lamp, and lay down on the creaking bed that was mine. The house breathed around me. I slept without fear, and when I woke before dawn, the lake light had already found my window. I thought, this is the first door I opened, and I am inside. Weeks turned into clean routines that made me feel sturdy inside my skin. I woke at 5 a.m., brewed a mug of strong coffee, and opened my notebook. Tips went into one jar, rent into another, and savings into a third. I liked the sound the coins made when they slid home, like small yes. By the end of the first month in Cleveland, I had $1,100 saved. On a quiet Sunday, I put $100 in an envelope and mailed it to Detroit with a short line. For the house. I'm okay. My mother texted within an hour. Where are you? I held the phone for a long breath and wrote back. In America, finding my place. That answer was true and also kind, and I needed both. Lena messaged at night. We were shocked. Why didn't you talk to us? The words blinked at me like a porch light. I set the phone face down on the table and let the message be what it was. Talking had not saved me before. Leaving had. I was learning that I could love my family and still love myself more than their comfort. I walked to the window and watched the street lamps stripe the snow. The city looked like it had been erased and drawn again, cleaner this time. I whispered, you did the hard thing, and the room held the words without arguing. At the cafe, a traveler from Europe spilled a latte and laughed, a warm sound that made the morning easier. We wiped the counter together. He told me he liked buses in strange towns and the way rain makes a day feel new. He left a folded note under the saucer, pound 5, and tapped the bell with 2 fingers as if to bless it. For luck, he said. I kept that small pound note in my wallet next to my bus pass. It reminded me that the world is wide and not closed to me. I could cross streets, seasons, and one day maybe oceans, but for now I was crossing my own small river from fear to steadiness. Noah and Grace helped me hunt for better pay. Noah, who moved fast and saw everything, said, "You're doing 2 jobs like a pro. Let's make those hours count more." Grace sent me links each night and said, "Choose what feels fair." By early spring, I stood in a downtown lobby with a new name tag pinned to my jacket, Maeve Miller, front desk. The hotel paid $19 an hour, steady and clean. I watched the revolving door spin and taught my voice to carry calm across a long counter. I learned to say, "Welcome, I can help," and to mean it. On Saturdays, I added a shift at a small event hall for $22 an hour, checking in guests with paper programs and nervous smiles. My feet hurt, but my spirit did not. I was building worth with both hands. Money began to feel less like panic and more like a choice. I tracked every dollar the way a gardener watches the first leaves. I kept the cafe mornings for a while because I liked the smell of steam and the short talks with regulars. Mr. Lee at the bookstore let me cut back nights without a fuss. He said, "Good work finds good workers," and handed me a paperback someone had left behind. I read on the bus and counted lights along the lake. Cleveland showed me its steady face. Market lines on Saturdays, buses always late by the same minutes, neighbors waving with a hammer still in hand. I felt seen in a way that did not ask me to shrink. I started to look at rentals not as rooms I had to borrow, but as homes I could choose. On Maple Street in Detroit, I had learned to hold my breath to keep the peace. In Cleveland, I learned to breathe and then decide. I found a small upper flat on a quiet street with old trees and a view of roofs like folded paper. The walls were pale yellow and warm even on gray days. The rent was $950 a month, and the lease had my name, Maeve Miller, and only mine. I signed the papers with a pen that did not skip, and the agent slid 2 keys across the desk as if passing me a story I could finish by myself. When I stood alone in that empty flat, I felt bigger than my past and smaller than the future, and both were good. Moving day was a low-budget parade. Noah helped me carry a used couch I bought for $120. The fabric was clean, and one cushion sighed like it remembered laughs from another room. Mrs. Parker let me take the crooked lamp for $10 and hugged me at the door. "Pay your rent on time and keep your own watch," she said. Mr. James from downstairs fixed a loose hinge and shrugged off my thanks like it was nothing. Carla from the corner waved from her table and put two $1 coffees in a paper bag. I pressed the £5 note to my palm and tucked it back into my wallet like a quiet cheer. The first night in the flat, I boiled pasta and ate from a bowl on the floor because my table would not arrive until next week. I set my jars on the window ledge. Tips, rent, savings. I slid $100 into the savings envelope the moment my paycheck hit and felt a click inside, like a lock turning. I bought a small plant for $9, a bright green thing with soft leaves. I named it Ben because it felt good to name something that would grow in my care. I put Ben on the sill and told him the rules I had taped to the wall. No one throws me out again. I pay myself first, and I choose who enters my house. The plant did not argue. It simply turned its face to the light. At the hotel, I kept learning the music of care. People brought their long days to my counter. A father from Chicago who had lost his wallet, a teacher from New York who feared she had left her notes in a cab, a couple from a small town in America who had saved for this weekend for a year. I stood straight, asked clear questions, and solved small problems with clean hands. "Thank you, Maeve," people said, and it felt like a paycheck the ledger could not show. On Saturdays at the hall, I watched brides breathe again when a missing ribbon was found, or a late aunt arrived at last. I learned that calm is a gift you can give and keep. On a warm evening, I walked home along the lake and counted the ways my life had changed since the night I left the blue house. I had keys that were mine. I had a lease with my name. I had a couch that told the truth when I fell into it, and a plant that lifted its small arms to the sun. I had $2,300 saved and a plan to reach $5,000 by summer if I kept saying no to things that cost more than they gave. I loved my family and also the space I had placed between us. I loved America because it had given me roads and rooms and work. I loved the idea of Europe because it reminded me that the map is larger than my street. I placed the £5 note beside my jars that night and smiled. Work had taught me my worth. My worth had taught me a new name for home. The place I choose, the place I can afford, the place that keeps me whole. 1 year after I left, I drove back to Detroit to see the blue house. The porch still leaned, but the door had new paint, a bright patch on an old story. I turned off the engine and sat a moment, breathing like a runner who had finally stopped. Mr. Carter from next door lifted his hand. "You look stronger," he called. I didn't know that showed, but I was glad it did. America likes to set hard days beside small, plain sights, soap on a rail, sun in a kitchen, and ask you to stand in both. I climbed the steps and knocked. My mother, Ruth, opened the door. My father, Daniel, stood behind her with his hands in his pockets. On the couch, my sister Lena sat with her husband Mark and their baby girl, Ella, asleep on her shoulder. For a long breath, we just looked at one another. Then I set my spare key on the table where we used to leave grocery lists. "I came to return this," I said, "and to tell a simple truth. I'm okay. I have my own place in Cleveland. I pay my rent on time. I saved $8,400 this year. I'm building a life I can trust." The numbers steadied my voice the way a railing steadies a step. We went to the kitchen because that room can carry weight. We spoke like careful builders, one plank at a time. I told them the basement smelled like damp and that the words, "You'll always be alone," made their own weather in my chest. My mother said, "I wanted quiet," and called it peace. My father said, "I should have stood up." Lena looked at Ella and then at me. "We were wrong," she whispered. No one argued. We made toast. We passed the butter. We let silence do part of the work. We did not fix the past. We honored it, and we laid a small, steady path forward. Before I left, my father opened the drawer with the tape and scissors and came back with 2 crisp bills. He pressed $200 into my palm. "For your house," he said. "Your house." I took it, not as a debt, but as a seed. Mark walked me to the porch with a bag of hand-me-downs, 2 good pans, and a blue mug that fit my hand. The oak tree shook its leaves like quiet applause. I drove west with the radio low and stopped by the lake. I thought of Europe the way you think of a lighthouse. Not now, but someday. I counted my cash, the new $200, the week's tips, the same old 10-pound note I keep for courage. Money can't buy peace, but it buys time, and time lets peace sit down and stay. Back in Cleveland, my flat smelled like lemons and warm dust. My plant, Ben, had leaned toward the window doing his small, honest work. I slid $100 straight into savings, wrote the date in my notebook, and taped a new card above my desk. I can earn, save, and rest. I set the 10-pound note beside it like a tiny flag from the future. I am Maeve, a woman who left at night and chose her morning. If you ever feel pushed to a basement, hear me. You can pack your things, count your dollars or pounds, and walk toward a door that opens to you. The porch may lean at first. That's okay. You will still cross it, turn the lock, and step inside.